Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Sri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sattvam Rajastama iti Nirgunasya Gunastraya Stiti Saga Nirodeshu Grihita Mayaya Vibho Sattvam Rajastama iti Nirgunasya Gunastraya Sthiti Sarga Nirodheshu Grihita Mayaya Vibho. Sattvam, the mode of goodness. Rajaha, the mode of passion. Tamaha, the mode of ignorance. Iti, all these. Nirgunasya, of the transcendence. Gunatraya, are three qualities. Sthiti, maintenance. Sarga, creation. Nirodeshu, in destruction. Grihitaha, accepted. Mayaya, by the external energy. Vibho, of the Supreme. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Supreme Lord is pure spiritual form, transcendental to all material qualities. Yet, for the sake of the creation of the material world and its maintenance and annihilation, He accepts, through His external energy, the material modes of nature called goodness, passion, and ignorance. Please repeat. The Supreme Lord is pure spiritual form, transcendental to all material qualities. Do you mind closing that door? Do you mind closing that door? Do you mind closing that? Thanks. Yet for the sake of the creation of the material world and its maintenance and annihilation, He He accepts through his external energy the material modes of nature called goodness, passion and ignorance. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord is the master of the external energy manifested by the three material modes, namely goodness, passion and ignorance. And as master of this energy, he is ever unaffected by the influence of such bewildering energy. The living entities, the jivas, however, are affected by or susceptible to being influenced by such modes of material nature. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entities. The living entities are subjected by those qualities, although originally the living entities are qualitatively one with the Lord. In other words, the material modes of nature, being products of the energy of the Lord, are certainly connected with the Lord, but the connection is just like that between the master and the servants. The Supreme Lord is the controller of the material energy, whereas the living entities who are entangled in the material world are neither masters nor controllers. Rather, they become subordinate to or controlled by such energy. Factually, the Lord is eternally manifested by his internal potency or spiritual energy, just like the sun and its rays in the clear sky. But at times he creates the material energy, as the sun creates a cloud in the clear sky. As the sun is ever increasingly unaffected by a spot of cloud, so also the unlimited Lord is unaffected by the spot of material energy manifested at times in the unlimited span of the Lord's rays of Brahma Jyoti. Oma Jnana Timidandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. So here Narad Muni continues to question Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma is answering about the status of the Lord, the Supreme Lord, explaining that he's not the Supreme Lord, but the Supreme Lord is eternal and is the master of all of the is the master of even Lord Brahma, and is eternally existing before the creation and after the creation. But it's being described here that the Lord creates this material energy by his own energy, and he's not affected by that. Just like the government creates a prison, but then the government is not affected by that prison. They are actually the masters of the prison house. It is the energy of the government, just like the material world is the energy of the Supreme Lord. So although the Lord comes to the world from time to time, he's not under the rules of the world, the material world. Just like the government ministers, if they visit the prison, they're not under the laws of the prison, although they may appear within the prison, but it's actually the energy of the government. But the conditioned living entities, they are described to be like the prisoners. They're like the prisoners who are under the control of this energy of the prison house, of the material world. But the energy of the Lord that is imprisoning the material energy, the living entities, sometimes called Durga Devi, and Durga means like a fort where you keep things, or a prison. And the special feature of this material energy prison is that it's a prison that has two special potencies, that it actually it restricts the freedom, but at the same time it actually covers the living entities such that they don't understand that their freedom's being restricted. So you can only imagine a prison where you go in there and you actually forget that you're in prison. And you just think, oh yes, it's great here, I'll make my different plans for doing so many different things. And you forget that actually the goal of the prison is to get out of there, to serve your time, try to reduce the time if you can by good behavior, and get out of there and re-establish your life in the free world. So this two potencies of Maya, of material energy, is the covering potency and then the throwing potency. So the throwing potency takes one away from the free life of the spirit, and then the covering potency actually covers one to think that this is very wonderful, that you don't need to actually do anything else. You're perfectly situated, you're very happy where you are. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:35, Canto 3, Chapter 30, Text 5, he said, Narakosto bideham vai, na pumans taktuvich hati, narakyam nivrito satyam, devamaya vimohitam. The conditioned living entity is satisfied in his own particular species of life, while deluded by the covering influence of the illusory energy. He feels little inclined to cast off this body, even when in hell, for he takes delight in hellish enjoyment. In this verse, Srila Prabhupada gives he relates the story of when Lord Indra, he actually was cursed to become a hog. So of course Lord Indra is, inconceivably opulent to us on the planet. On this planet, we can read in Mahabharata that sometimes there's, in previous ages, before Kali Yuga, there was actually much more contact between the residents of the higher planets and the earth planet. And actually when the great kings of the world would hold sacrifices, and there would be so much gold and so many mantras chanted and very auspicious atmosphere, then they could actually call the leaders, sometimes Lord Brahma or Lord Indra, or the recipients of the sacrifice, to actually come. And even in general terms, there were other more common. Of course, we can read, if we look in the literature, there's many people who describe having contact with beings from other realms. Every culture has that. Every traditional culture has that there. And there are some very credible accounts of people in very recent times as well, having interactions with beings that are obviously from another level of existence. But anyway, so in the level of opulence that we read in Mahabharata, that when these beings come down, they just think that actually human beings are pretty gross, actually, like, wow, humans, wow, goodness me, do I have to even talk to these people? It's like, so that's their level is really beyond our imagining. We can imagine the greatest human, whatever it is, a yacht in the Mediterranean, and there's whatever the billboard is showing as the perfection of material, opulent situation on this human level. But Lord Indra is so far above that really we can't even actually conceive. We can't even get our head around it in this human form of what life is like there. But nevertheless, he came and actually took the position of a hog, of a pig, and he had his wife and he had his children, and he was very happy there. So this is the covering potency of Maya. And actually when Lord Brahma came to take Lord Indra and say, it's time to go back to heaven, you need to do your job up there, he said, what do you talk about heaven? He said, this is my heaven right here. He said, look, I have my wife, I have my children, I have this big pile of mud here, I have these scraps of food that they give me sometimes to eat. Oh, I'm so happy. There's a saying sometimes, like a pig in mud. Anybody heard that saying? Yes? No? Like a pig in mud. And someone's very happy in their situation, but it's actually not a very nice situation, but they're very happy due to their consciousness. And this is described very scientifically by Srimad Bhagavatam, excuse me, as the covering energy of Maya, that the Maya can actually take you away from Krishna consciousness and can then cover you and say, oh, you're perfectly happy. It's something to note for aspiring devotees about the scientific process of this, that it is possible to actually get into Maya and think that you're much happier. because this covering potency. You can actually think, oh wow, that's... But actually, this covering potency, I guess a good example is something like an anesthetic. It's like an anesthetic. It's like, makes you unconscious of the pain of actually being separated from the loving service of the Supreme Lord. Loving service, serving with all His devotees. So we have to be very, very careful with this Maya energy. It can actually cover us. We're very small, we're very insignificant, very small. We can be covered by Maya and think that, yes, we're fine, everything's great. So we have to chant very sincerely, take shelter of the Lord. So we're within this energy. We have to understand what it is we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a prison house that at the same time has this magical potency. I think in the Narnia books, there was some guy, I remember that guy with the big duck feet, and there was when I was a kid I read this, and the kid, what do you call, the fire, and he puts the fire out with his duck feet, and everybody comes back, oh my God, that's right. We're actually not, it's not all wonderful here, we're actually being imprisoned. So the material world's like that. It's a prison house that we're in that also makes us forget we're in a prison house. Right? Prabhupada said the biggest problem with the Westerners is that, I don't know if he said with Westerners or with devotees in general, but I'm not sure, but he said the biggest problem is that we don't fear Maya actually. They think, everything's fine, it's all good, it's alright, no problem. But this is actually the covering potency of Maya. You can see as we see the advanced devotees, they write their books, they're very, very careful. You know, Maya, she's like they describes like a witch. It's like a witch taking away the intelligence, bewildering one, because they have the actual perception of the bliss of the service to the Lord on the eternal platform, and reawakening that. And they're very, very, very careful about getting reinfected with this forgetfulness. So this is the difference described here between the Lord and the individual soul. Basically, that the individual soul, can very easily be affected by this illusion, by this material energy, but the Lord doesn't become affected. But originally the living entities are qualitatively one with the Lord. And just like the Lord has independence, He's ultimately independence. This is the Purusha, this is the masculine principle. The Lord is the supreme Purusha, supreme masculine. The masculine nature is independence. The feminine nature is dependence. So we're all feminine by nature, by eternal nature. We're all feminine, we're all dependent on the Lord. But the Lord has the ultimate independence. And because of that, we also have some minute quality of independence. We can make our own decision. So actually, although we have the original nature of the Lord, spiritual nature, through misuse of that independence, we wanted to situate ourselves within this illusion actually. The main point is that we're wanting to, the pure soul is thinking, what would it be like rather than, if I was the center, if this was mine. In the spiritual world there's no room for that, because everything is the Lord's, and all the love, it goes to one point, and everybody together is loving the Lord, and He's unlimitedly loving everybody. And it's all perfect like that. But there's no idea for this is mine. This is me, this is mine. Aham mameti. So when one wants that idea of this is mine, then he has to be an illusion. There's no other choice, because that's not reality. Everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Lord, mercifully, He creates this illusion, this material illusion, so that living entities can fulfill their desire. Yayatamam prapadityatam sateva jamyaham. As they interact with the Lord, He very mercifully gives us the experience of being the controller, of having our life, of having our separate existence from the Lord's. And this is the reason we come to this material world. Sometimes people get very confused and say, how is it if the spiritual world is perfect, then how would we ever want to leave? But the point is, it's not a point of situation. Because if it was a point of situation, it wouldn't matter. It's a point of relationship. It's not that situation is perfect. Just like people can be in the most perfect situation, but they get bored and they say, no, I want to go here, I want to do something else, I want to go and talk to someone, do different things. You can be in Brahman, and from here it seems wonderful, because we're struggling to pay the bills, struggling to make relationships work, struggling with so many things. So that seems wonderful. But once you're there, once you get rid of all those relationships, then it's just boredom. The situation itself is not satisfying. So it's not a matter of that the situation is perfect and why would we want to leave that. It's a matter of relationship, that we're having a relationship with the Supreme Lord. We're in His pastimes. But at the same time, for some reason or other, our independence, we use it to say, just what would it be like? What would it be like to sort of be in that position of the one, the control of that? And maybe, like I could just become like Lord Brahma. I'll still be a pure devotee. I'll still be Krishna's pure devotee, but at the same time I'll just have my own little universe over here. Sometimes the acharyas describe that the first step into the material world is to become like Lord Brahma. And actually, this is the just the seed of contaminated consciousness that then everything else grows on. Then you have to get a false ego, false sense of self. Because if I'm the servant of the Lord, how's the question of me being the controller and me being the owner, me being the Lord? I'm the servant. So you have to get in that illusion, you have to have the false ego. Alright, this is your sambandha, this is who you are, then you can act within the material world. So all these things come, but from the original thing of just thinking, what would it be like to be the Lord? And the acharyas explained that we have all come from that. We have, as being described here again, by Srila Prabhupada, that the living entities originally had the same quality as the Lord, the spiritual quality, bliss, knowledge, eternality. This is how we come. We decide to come. We have to be put into illusion to experience that desire. So Krishna also says, he describes this big difference. It's a slightly separate point, but Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, "Apariyamitasthonyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho yaidam dharite jagat." That these living entities are actually separate from the matter. So the living entities come in the material world, and we have this philosophy now. Basically, the predominant knowledge philosophy of science is that there is no difference. There is no major categorical difference between spirit and matter. Everything is just matter. And somehow or another that matter is combined together to give the idea that there is consciousness and spirit and so forth. This is a predominating worldview for the last 150 years or so. It's a very short amount of time actually if you think about it in the span of human existence. But of course the philosophy has been around more or less in different forms since time eternal. But Krishna and the Vedic literatures make a very, very clear distinction here, that there is a big difference between the matter and spirit. The living entities are exploiting these inferior energies for different purposes, Prabhupada says in the purport. They're the superior energy of the Lord, and it's due to this energy and it's due to this energy that the entire material world functions. So it's due to the superior energy. In other words, it's due to the people. It's due to the living entities that the whole material world functions. If it was just matter, nothing would move. So we can imagine that if we have like a stone out here in the garden, and there's a big stone sitting there, and if we come back the next day and we see the stone has moved from there to over there, what do we assume? Sit nicely, come on, try to sit nicely. What can we assume? The stone decided, I think I want to sit over there. The stone suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. I'm done with just sitting around. I'm going to sit over there now. Would we think that? Would anyone think that? No. No one would think that. Why don't we think that? Because the stone is material energy. How does material energy decide to move on its own? What would all of you think if you noticed there was a stone there and then the next day you came and the stone was sitting in another place? What would you think? Sadhu, you got a suggestion? Maybe a person picked it up. I think most of us would be thinking that. Maybe the rock grew legs. Maybe. We could check it out and see if there were any legs under that rock. But exactly, so either the rock became a person or a person moved it, right? They're the two options really. So if we extrapolate this to the whole material world, we can see that the whole material world is just pieces of rocks. There's nothing else. There's nothing magical. If a rock is spinning around somewhere, it's like, well, who made it spin? Who pushed it to get it started to spin? Right? You think about that for a minute. This whole material world is just like a rock. It's just matter. How does matter decide to move, to do anything? The Vedas explain that it doesn't, it can't. Yayidam daryate jagat. The cosmic manifestation has no power to act unless it is moved by the superior energy or the living entity. Right? This is the Vedic version, is that there's a very different energy. There's all the material energy and then there's spiritual energy. Jiva Bhutta Mahabhava. And therefore the Vedic knowledge comes from a very different angle than the angle of the modern scientific knowledge. So the modern scientific knowledge is all about how to understand how matter interacts with itself. How to understand. How can we make this matter act with that matter? Then we get this other matter. Take some big rocks, do something to it, and then we get the aluminium out of it, some silicon, and then you have the computer, all those different things. Like how do we interact matter with itself? How does matter interact with itself? This is the focus of modern science, right? But what's the focus of the Vedic science? The focus of the Vedic science, because they accept there is a living entity, there's a spiritual person, the focus is on how to disentangle the spirit, the spiritual being from matter. So they accept there's all the matter and then there's a spiritual being, and then the science is how do you disentangle, how do you free that living being, that person, from the engagement of all this matter, subtle and gross material matter, and then subtle desires of the mind, which are also subtle matter that's binding the pure living entity. Therefore the modern scientific system breaks everything into categories of matter and how the matter interacts with itself. Whereas the Vedic system breaks the material world into categories of how the soul is affected by that matter. For example, in the modern science we have the periodic table, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, etc. And that is how the matter will interact. This gas will interact with this element in this way. But then in the Vedic we have the three modes of material nature. We have goodness, passion and ignorance. It's how does the soul interact with matter? What are the qualities of matter that bind or liberate the soul? How does the living entity interact with matter? The modern is, how does matter interact with itself? In chapter 14 of Bhagavad Gita, which is actually called the Three Modes of Material Nature, this is very described in detail. And at the end of that chapter, Krishna says that when one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than the modes of nature, and if he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. So this knowledge, the Vedic knowledge, lets one see how the material world is working, how the different modes are working, how they're interacting. And when one can see that all these different things that everybody's chasing after and running from and trying to embrace and trying to follow, and in the material world, all of the material activities and qualities, they're simply interaction of the different modes of material nature. And actually the Supreme Lord is beyond those. And then one can actually get free from this material nature and attain the spiritual nature again. So I think I'll stop there because we have a little less time today. So we'll continue next time. But is there any question or comment on any of these things? Yes, Vaishnavi Manji. Do you want to take the... Is there another microphone? Or?
It's hard to turn on the bottom.
Do you want to take this one? Oh, maybe that's why.
You mentioned about how we had that thought that what would it be like if we were the center, and as aspiring devotees, as practitioners, how can we practically, because we have this false ego, and how can we like practical steps to burn out that false ego, because we can understand theoretically that Krishna is the center, but then we act in a way that we're trying to protect ourselves or things like that.
Excuse me. Thank you. Excellent question. Thank you. Yes. So, let me just contrast some other processes of self-realization and how they deal with this. And most other forms of spiritual advancement, they also understand this point, that the problem is that we have material identification, therefore we have material desire that's catching our mind to run after so many things, and this is hiding our spiritual nature and stopping us from reawakening our spiritual nature. So generally the process, if we look at other forms of self-realization, is to basically stop interacting. So you have a false ego, you have desires, then you say, no, I won't do that. I'll go and sit in a monastery somewhere. I will ignore them. I will do some regulated process to get me in the mode of goodness. Maybe there's some mantras, some holy books, and I'll just try to ignore them and let them gradually go away. This is described by Krishna as a very difficult process. Nihabhikramana is what's that verse? It says it's by the impersonal path, by saying, I will just ignore this false ego, just try to let it, hope that it goes away. It's very, very difficult, and after many, many births, you may attain success in that. But what Krishna is giving us in the Bhakti Yoga process is something very different. Sadhu, you okay? Sit down properly. Just sit down. Sit peacefully. Huh? It's okay. Just you're moving so much, I keep thinking of you moving, I can't focus so much on the class. Thank you. So Krishna gives a process where rather than try to just ignore the material identity and the material desire, he says that rather than that, then you engage that in my service. So the whole issue is that we've taken on this point of trying to become the controller when actually we're the servant. And over millions of lifetimes we develop this identity as a false ego. And all we have to do now is to again become a servant, and we're again situated in our constitutional position. Once in Melbourne, you can see on the video, one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, how long does it take? He said, we've been serving Maya, we've been serving material desire for hundreds and thousands of lifetimes. So does that mean we have to then practice serving Krishna for thousands of lifetimes to sort of reverse that karma, reverse that activity? So how long does it take? And Prabhupada immediately said, you watch the video, it's amazing. Immediately he says, a moment. He says, you're not reading Bhagavad Gita? Savadama Bhrijaja Mamikam Sharam Braja Ham Tam Savarpapabhya Moksha Ishami Masucha. So it just takes a moment, and Krishna can take away all of that material conditioning if we surrender to Him. So, Krishna is describing an incredibly powerful process that millions of births can be counteracted in a moment. Now, of course, to surrender to Krishna in a moment is not, it's not a small thing to actually completely awaken that idea of that practically manifest of being a servant. But nevertheless, that's the process. So practically, the question was like, how do we practically? What was the word you used? How do we practically burn up? Yeah, burn up that desire. I don't know how to say this another way, but I'll just say that I don't know if that's really the right way to think about it. I don't know if I'm overstepping my bounds here, but I don't know that thinking to burn out that false ego, burn out that desire is really the bhakti process, because that's more like some other process. But the bhakti process is really, what is that false ego? What is it? To know yourself first of all. Okay, what is it? What interests me? So what is my interest? What is my nature? What is that? And then I use that in Krishna's service directly. So if someone has the nature to be like a great leader of people and make everybody follow them, and they speak with such intensity that everyone wants to get up, do that. Then rather than saying, oh no, that's not spiritual, that's a material thing, I have to become all meek and humble and do that. Then rather than that, the bhakti yoga process is, yes, do that, inspire people, talk to people, become a leader, become a great, leader of people for Krishna. Do it for Krishna, And someone might be very great at making money, and they're expert at money and everything. They say, oh no, this money making that's not a spiritual thing. Oh, I better stop that. Oh, I'll just sit and I'll just chant. But the bhakti yoga process, and Rupa Goswami, you know the verse very well, right? Anasaktasya vishanyataham upayunjata nirvanda Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchate. So this yuktam vairagya, yukta means the same thing as yoga, means connected, right? So yukta vairagya, connected renunciation. So renouncing the idea that we're the controller, but not just renouncing doing anything. Arjuna was out there on the battlefield, fighting. He was doing so many things as a kshatriya, and that's how the false ego is burnt out, as you say, because it's all Krishna's energy, and if we offer the thing that we are most attached to Krishna, then that's also a great sign of love. If you have a great thing that you find very valuable and then you give to somebody, then that's great. So we all think that our false ego is so valuable. We're thinking, I have this false ego to be. We just have to see, just by contemplation, like, how can that be offered to Krishna? And then we won't feel any trying to find the right word, disturbance or lacking, but we won't find that that false ego is stopping us. It's not an impediment. Oh, my false ego is such an impediment. But it's not an impediment. It's just use it for Krishna's service. Then suddenly that false ego becomes real ego. Gradually. So it's a very powerful process, but it's a different process to what we normally think of as spiritual processes, where it's just, you just give up that, you give up that. Of course, you have to, yuktam, it said, anasaktasya vishaham yataham upayunja nirbandha Krishna sambhade. So without attachment. So therefore it has to be done under guidance of other people, other devotees. We can't just think, oh, I'm doing this for Krishna. And all the other devotees are like, well, I don't know, it doesn't seem like Krishna. It seems like for yourself, you just want to do that. And that's not devotion. It has to be what you're doing is, you identify, what you can do, you identify as in terms of false ego, what is your identity? What do you identify with? And then say, well, how can I engage that in Krishna's service? Does that make sense? Is that okay? Yep, quickly, Sadhu, one more. Yeah.
And you're saying we have to pay our bills, and once we get everything, we're not actually happy. Like the rich people who's got everything.
Is this a question?
It's not a question.
Oh, that's a comment. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a good comment.
Everything that you can't get in, because he's already got everything.
Lord Indra. Maybe you can explain to me after exactly. I get the gist of it, that even if you have everything material, still you're not happy. Right. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. He's